Welcome to Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy Podcast, the official Society for the Teaching of Marriage and Family Therapy, STMFT in short, podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sofia Georgiadou. I created STMFT and this podcast as an antidote to the isolation I experienced as an early career academic. I also created STMFT in this podcast as a space to allow myself and my colleagues to share resources and bridge the way we do systemic therapy with the way we teach systemic therapy in our classrooms. Today, I have a fascinating discussion lined up for you. Our discussion features one newly minted PhD, gearing up for the next phase of their academic journey, and one MFT professor who has been navigating the path of academia for a while and is here to share her insights. Here with us today, we have Dr. Afarin Rajaei, PhD, LMFT. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, an esteemed author dedicated to advancing personal growth, emotional awareness, and resilience through her professional work. She serves as the associate editor of the International Journal of Systemic Therapy and frequently presents on topics such as deep inclusion work, exploring romantic relationships, and integrated healthcare systems. Our newly minted PhD today is Dr. Ryan Lloyd. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist supervisor, AMFT approved supervisor candidate, and a licensed chemical dependency counselor working in North Texas. He primarily works with clients with co-occurring psychiatric and substance abuse disorders involved in criminal justice, high conflict families, and couples. He has worked in both inpatient and outpatient settings, but he aims to get to a teaching position. In this episode, we'll be exploring some insightful questions that we pre-sourced from Ryan, and will be answered by Afarin. And I'll be facilitating the conversation, and I'm excited to hear Ryan's experiences leading to his questions and Afarin's perspectives and lessons learned. So without further ado, let's dive into our first question, Ryan.
Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate this. Efrain, I'm really curious here. What has inspired you most, along your journey? With training systemic therapists. What do you like? What do you draw upon when you feel like you're kind of needing some inspiration? When you're thinking about really just kind of fires that flame up in you when you're thinking about training therapists in the field today?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me here, and thanks for the great question, Ryan. So I think many things, but if I can talk about only one thing, I would say witnessing the transformative power of systemic thinking when I work with students, trainee, supervisees. So for example, when I work with them and they are working with a family or a couple, and there's this identified patient or client, right? So what we call quote unquote the problem. And then so they try to focus on the individual, focusing on the symptoms or disorders, whatever it is. And then when we have the conversation actually about the systemic thinking and kind of perspective, talking about the different relational aspects of the issue, the problem, the conversation, the dynamic, right? And then thinking about kind of the links between what we see as a quote unquote problem, the links between that and the different family members or dynamics or stories, kind of seeing and witnessing the power of that transformation in therapists and trainees and supervisors. That has been very inspiring for me.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I can totally relate to this as well. I'm wondering for you, Afarin, was teaching always the goal? When you got into your PhD program, did you have that always in the back of your mind? That's where I'm heading.
Yeah, I think so. I guess even it goes back to when I was a teenager. I was 14 years old, and I decided that I wanted to be a psychologist and have PhD in psychology. At that time, all I knew about mental health was clinical psychology. So that's how I made that decision. And, here I am. And yeah, so I had in mind that I want to teach, I want to do therapy. And then on somewhere on the journey also, I decided to do research studies, all of that.
Awesome. Yeah. Ryan, what did you think about that? What are your thoughts?
It sounds to me like this idea of like really conceptualizing is really big. I know for me in my training, that was something that really kind of clicked with me. I was like, hey, like
Mm,
how do I better understand these families? Something that differentiates us from I think other types of therapists is that we work with multiple people in the room, right? And that's just a lot more difficult for us to have to like stretch and be able to think about that. And so I know it was just for me personally, it was a really difficult concept to really grasp onto. But when I did, it helped me view people very, very differently. And I know I kind of draw upon that myself. And it seems like you kind of help, lead students to, to do the same. I'm kind of wondering as well, just as like a follow up question on this, just a little bit. Whenever, kind of when you're cultivating your supervisees, um, I know we talked about a little bit, but like inspires you. Have you ever like talked to like students or supervisees or seen differences where you feel like you see what inspires them about what goes on? I'm wondering if that kind of matches up with you and this idea of what you're talking about.
mhm,
It's for me, right? The question, not Sofia. So I think a lot of times, Ryan, for me, it's that aha moment that I see in them. So when like we have all these different conversations and sometimes different tools, exercises for them to kind of like grasp the meaning and the work. And then once they do the work, kind of like a lot of times I see like they have this aha moment. Oh, it makes sense. What I see, like it goes back to it's like onion, like there are all these different layers, right? And there's this relational piece into it. So I think that I see that aha moment in them as well, which is again, like for me, it's very, very beautiful.
yeah, agreed. I remember the first time that I learned about systemic therapy, I was in undergrad. I took an elective, like a family psychology course. And that's when things started really clicking for me. And it was almost like I couldn't unsee what
Mhm.
I learned in that moment. And so everything started, um, my lens completely changed. I was looking at all the behaviors in their context. I was looking at punctuation when people were describing, interactions with others and things like that. And so I'm wondering, I'm always kind of in the back of my head, especially teaching like intro to family therapy. I'm wondering, when are my students going to have this
Mm.
moment where things will start clicking, or do people have this experience all the time, or it's just a gradual thing, right? Um, I'm always wondering about that. And I don't know how it happened for you, Ryan, but I'm curious about it.
No, I think you hit the
Yeah.
nail right on the head. I know for me, it was when I was taking one of my mentors at the time, Dr. Mike Bishop. He teaches over at Texas Blessing, my alma mater. I was taking one of his family of origin classes, and something about family of origin, right, bubbles up in our clients, and we see it. It bubbles up in us, and when we see it, right, is when I took that class. That's when that aha moment, because of we'd all had the academic studies. We kind of got the like Afarin, we were talking about the we want to do psychology, right? Like let's learn these theories, these models, these people. Freud. We're like, okay, cool, we're academic, we get this, but didn't really like feel it. And I remember it was in that family of origin class that really brought that up for me. Like, oh, this is a very like visceral experience, like an aha moment, like was in my bones. Um, and yeah, once you kind of see and feel that systemic, like you kind of scratch that itch, like you can't unscratch that. And so yeah, absolutely, for me, it was the family of origin, but for others around me, I think there's a lot of different diversity in which you see it, and I'm excited to learn more about you guys, about kind of where in which you guys see that, and kind of curious, just as another follow up. Um, do you guys see that more often in like earlier on trainees of students, or do you see that okay it's when you get in your internship or it's when you're practicum and all of a sudden you're sitting in
Mm,
front of somebody that reminds you of you when you were 15? If
mm,
that's received from students, I'm just kind of curious from the more
yeah.
seasoned professors.
Corinne, what do you think?
That's a great question. I think that I've seen both, but mostly like as a students, they learn about all these different things, specifically like when they start, like because you can talk about all these different concepts and systemic thinking for hours and days and years, right? And sometimes some part of it could be kind of like abstract for them. So specifically in my experience, when they start like doing some sort of like exercises, role playing, genograms, stuff like that, they're like, oh, like that. Now, like, yeah, we were talking about addiction for years, but now when I do the genogram, I said this, generation, that, like those kinds of things. So that's my experience. I don't know about you, Sophia. Do you see it more like in the beginning?
Yeah, genograms is a good one, definitely. I'm also wondering if students have these moments in practicum, like when they see their first client or something. I would hope that they have them before, though. Like, please don't wait until you get to practicum to have a moment like this. I would hope that they have them before, but definitely introduction to family therapy, like probably the first class of their first semester, at least here in our program at Clear Lake. Yeah, I think there's a lot of just so much new information and reading that's happening in that class. So much exposure to new information. We might watch like I don't know, Monica McGoldrick, working in session with the client, doing a genogram, and then like that sparks a really interesting conversation for students. Lots of discovery that's happening there. The wheels are definitely turning in that class for sure. In experiential activities, like Afarin said, like role plays and things like that. Yeah, yeah.
If I can add one thing, and this is not the way, this is just a way, one way of like maybe teaching or training. So what I usually do, like in any class that I teach, it's theories, diversity, whatever it is. I also talk about way the students talk about the fact that from my perspective, therapy is not doing, is being. So, and I encourage them to practice everything that they learn in everyday life, right? So that includes like systemic thinking. That includes like when you watch the news or read something on the news about whatever is going on in society, and you want to like think about, oh, this has to do with this thing, and it's because of that thing. You can like have that systemic thinking that maybe it's not just because of that factor, maybe it's multiple layers and thinking about this and that and all the different contexts. So I think that's also I hope that is also helpful to students to like practice whatever they learn in the training, in the program, in their everyday life, because again, like that's my way of thinking, that being a therapist it's not just doing, it's just being.
Yes, with a caveat not to do it to your spouse too often, problems ensue. I have been blamed for this before. All right, Ryan, do you want to share your second question with us?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So the second question that came to my mind was, Afarin, when beginning your teaching career, what did you find most difficult about just getting started? Like post, like you got conferred, got going, right, and then you kind of hit the ground running. And on the other end of that, what did you find most helpful?
So can you repeat the last part of your question? Sorry, I didn't hear it.
No, of course. So I was asking you, when first starting your career, what did you find most difficult with getting started? And on the other hand, what did you find maybe most helpful?
Yeah. So it's challenging that you ask for the most difficult, but there are probably many difficult things. But one thing that I think I still practice it to this day is like in the beginning of my career, finding my voice was really difficult as a teacher, even like sometimes as a therapist. And that has to do with intersectionality, the different kind of like social location factors that I have being here as an immigrant woman, like with accent and everything, but also like in general, like if you look at like, for example, MFT theories, most of them, they are developed by white men, right? And then you go and you teach all these different theories. And I think that it was challenging for me to like, you have all these different students in front of you and talk about all these different theories, but also, have your own voice in it, right? Or, even like when you have an exercise homework, whatever, like on your syllabus and students, they have questions about it, they don't like it, right? Again, like finding your voice to stand up for your choice. that was challenging for me. And I think that in a way, like today that I'm here, I became better and better, but still like that is something that I'm working on. And I hope that actually everyone works on that in different roles that they have, in different social locations that they go in. So yeah, that was one of the most challenging thing for me, finding my voice in what I do. I don't know how it was for you, Sophia.
I'm also curious, Afarin, what was helpful? Was it mentors? What was it for you in the beginning that was helpful?
A lot of tears. No, I'm just joking. I'm not joking. I'm
Just
like,
cry, just
yeah.
some emotional release. Yeah.
But yeah, so I had great mentors, and I'm very grateful for them. So having mentors and also a support network that could be, hopefully you have some safe, brave spaces with your colleagues or a few of your colleagues, or people even like outside of like your field, but like people who understands what you're going through and they are willing to listen, and even like they have some experience maybe in different settings but kind of like with the same experience of again like finding your voice, like tell the truth even if your voice shakes, all those different things. Using different resources, reading books about social injustice issues and inclusion work, all those different things, and also practicing a lot of times when, and again, like still to this day, when I try to tell the truth, so my voice shakes, but I try to just practice being brave and go with it.
I just share just a couple of thoughts I had while Afarin was talking. I can relate to so much, of course, because I also came here as an international graduate student to the States. Um, so there was a lot of legal immigration to navigate while I was in my PhD program and also afterwards. Um, Talking with colleagues about my desire to teach and what types of topics I was interested in teaching, I think that kind of helps put you in the radar for folks. So when the opportunity comes or they hear about an opportunity, they can remember you, right? And say, oh, Brian mentioned that he's interested in teaching psychopathology, right? Maybe we can reach out to him. Um, the other thing that was really life-changing for me as an educator, because I don't think I had a pedagogy class in my PhD. I knew a lot of advanced clinical skills and supervision and all of those great things, right? But there was really no class on how to build a class in my PhD program. So I found myself reaching out for continuing education in this area. And I attended a lot of programming at the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning, CIRTL.net, I think is the website. Through them, John Hopkins University had a first year teaching academy that happened virtually a few years ago. And I attended that, and that was also life changing in many ways. So I just remember doing a lot of self learning in how to be an educator, in addition to being a very advanced MFT practitioner, right? So there was um, there was a lot of learning that happened in those areas of course design, course development, backwards design, figuring out what kind of teacher I wanted to be, thinking about good examples of professors I had, and then behaviors of professors that I wasn't really particularly fond of, and like, how do I want to show up for my students, kind of a thing. Um, Finding joy in teaching. Like I realized very early, I'm not a big lecturer. So I had to blend in my lectures with other stuff during all my classes. So there was a lot of that kind of trial and error process and a lot of continuing education for sure in the beginning.
I can really appreciate that from both of you guys. Particularly, Afarin, you're talking about like the voice. Like, I got to find my voice in teaching. I'm not just going to regurgitate information that we could read something out. Like, we need to be able to like contextualize this and personalize this. There's a lot of really, like I said, the intersectionality that comes in that constitutes just who we are as people, in particular our role as an educator too. And I think that really makes sense because I know a lot of the teachers professors, right, and even mentors that really had made the most impact on me, like you were saying, Sophia, were those who knew what they were good at and kind of knew their strengths and really played their voice into that. The people that had the most kind of passion, kind of inspiration within their, within their lectures and within, our supervision meetings, these types of things. And so it seems to me like this isn't something that like comes along very easy. You have to really work towards it, is what I'm hearing. Like as a professor, like, hey, I have to work to find this voice. This doesn't just happen upon. We got to go out there and like venture and find it. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like when I talk to my clients sometimes about relationship stuff like that, I would tell them that one of the most important factor is you being intentional in your relationship. And I think it's the same thing just for us, just navigating life and also like academia and teaching. I think like, again, like that's one thing that I've learned. Like, the more that I'm intentional about teaching, that means like the more mindful I am, the more I try to be resourceful. I try to ask for help if I don't know something, and also like being mindful of myself, being self of the teacher, right? Finding my voice and all those different things.
Yeah. Ryan, yeah, tell us about your next question. What did you have in mind?
Yes, I'm actually pulling that up right now. I had it on my thing and then I ended up losing it. And so I apologize. I'm looking for it right here. I know I sent them over to you beforehand.
I can also share if you want.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'm so sorry about that.
Sure.
I don't know what I did with that.
Yeah, so Ryan was wondering, Afarin, what are some tools or techniques you use to assist therapists in training who are new to systemic thinking and struggle with conceptualizing systems thinking?
That's a great question. And actually, that happens a lot because some of these things that we talk about, including systemic thinking, it can be abstract, or they're like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but what does that mean, or how can I do it? So I think in the beginning, I try to help them to make the concept more kind of like tangible for them. And one of the things that I already mentioned that it's very useful in my experience is the genogram, right? So they draw all these different generations and talk about all these different, issues, aspects, social location factors, whatever. And like when at the end they look at the whole genogram, there's this, oh wow, I never thought, I consider all these different things, but separately. I never like sit down and think about it in a systemic way of like thinking. So that so a lot of times role playing. So I do role playing in my class, and then after that we have a discussion about all the different relationships and links and contexts and directions. Even like sometimes I ask them to journal about their experience in this role play as a therapist, and what kind of biases they have, what are some of the things that they stood out to them, or they missed out, all those different things. Sometimes we do the role play, and then after that we have a conversation and we redo the role play, now this time with more of a systemic perspective, like more kind of like circular questions, stuff like that. And that is very helpful to them. So they kind of like experience the same content with the different process, which is for them again, like it's like the difference between content and the process, or how it's like, how cool it is to look at it from a different lens or perspective. And I also try to really emphasize supervision for them, either if they are in a developmental stage that they have, practicum supervisors, supervisions, or talking about the future. I even have this conversation that I think that in the Europe, like when you are licensed, you still need to have supervision, but in the US, once you're licensed, technically, like legally, you don't, or ethically, you don't need that. But I think that it could be very helpful if you continue having supervision, because we always have blind spots and we can always use a different and third perspective. So those are the things that I use with the students, and in my experience, they have been helpful.
That's lovely. I think, yeah, students get so much out of genograms. I remember getting so much out of doing my own genogram in one of those first few classes in my master's program. I'm also seeing that students respond really well to learning concepts such as circular questions. There's a really good article, I think Mara Selvini Palazzoli was the main author. I can put it in the show notes for our audience, and I can share with you, Ryan, as well. Lots of circular questions examples in that paper, and it's a very early paper, of course, written in the 70s probably. But yeah, just such a practicing circular questions really gives people an understanding of like that cycle of interaction. So I think getting that and then getting into triangulation. I think explaining triangulation as a concept and talking about how unstable a diet can be and how that third person comes in to stabilize the relationship, that also helps put context into like systemic thinking and looking at multiple people interacting with one another. um what else? I'm thinking I generally, no matter what we talk about, I always tend to ask students like, what is someone getting out of a particular behavior, no matter how problematic it can seem. So looking at secondary benefits always, and like, um, how are others reacting to that behavior, whether that's, getting attention or not getting attention if you don't want to be in the spotlight. Um, just looking at how the behavior makes sense if you look at the context. That's kind of always the golden rule, and a thing that I find myself asking students very often during conversations about cases, or even in the very early classes of like systemic assessment, interviewing families, stuff like that. um yeah, I don't know that I'm trying to think about a specific tool. um I think watching video of therapy sessions and pausing every so often to process what's happening instead of like watching for 30 minutes and like talking about it afterwards. Pausing every so often and asking like, where do you see the cycle, right now, between this mom and daughter, or this family or couple. I think that's also helpful, just kind of really slowing down to process what do you see and what do you observe.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that from you guys because again, that I don't know, it just really aligns with what really inspired me the most. To go back to how you first answered the the very first question I asked, Afarin, this idea about what inspires you the most. You talked about how, which I really appreciated, like these concepts that we talk about, they're really abstract. So we have to find a way to like pull them down into ways that students who are, man, this is like their first graduate class ever, who are like, I don't know what any of this is. I mean, we've got to be able to like somewhat give them something tangible to leave. Um, and I know for me, this was when I was in my doctoral program, but one of the ways they did that was that that's when the Uvalde shooting was happening. I was about halfway through. It's when the for the school out there, and what we did is we took that real case and applied it to like what's going on, and like we had some public policy stuff that we kind of did. But I know that that was something that was helpful for me, even as like I was already fully licensed at this point. Going forward, continue to conceptualize as I was working with my supervisees. And it goes back to what you were saying, is like we can't, it's unfortunate that here in the States, once you're like terminal, like you're just kind of set free. It's like, hey, go consult if you need to, but you're good. But it's a lifelong process, right? It's not what you do, it's who you are. You never really stop being who you are, right? And so I couldn't agree more. And that circular questioning, luckily, no one model owns that. So we can utilize that on postmodern, modern, a lot of different ways. And so I know that was really helpful for me. And just to comment on one other thing, you guys seem really experiential in the way you like to do this. and I'm partial to that as well, kind of helping define this voice you're talking about. We did this another one of my mentors, Dr. Violetta Godiva. She teaches over at Wesleyan as well. She's a graduate of Texas Tech. She came in and was real big on like live supervision and like doing the Milan like Greek choir thing. So we had like one of our cohort members like doing a session, and then like we had like the client, which was a couple, like go out behind the one way mirror, and then like we all came in and like did a reflecting team like while they like watched like with the other therapist, and then like brought it back in. And like that was such a powerful moment for me, because you can always talk about, oh well, you should reflect with the client, oh go have a reflecting team mid session, but until you like do it and you kind of immerse yourself in it, I remember that being a really powerful moment, and starting to kind of get to see, like hearing the client say, I never thought of it that way before. It's almost like a vicarious aha moment, can be helpful for conceptualizing. Um, Anyways, I just really appreciate that. It seems like you guys, for not having taken a pedagogy class in your graduate work, it seems like you guys have a lot of, or at least for you, Sophie, have a lot of creative ways in which you try to like cultivate thinking about these really big things into very concrete steps for students and trainees.
Yeah, I think getting a lot of feedback from students also helps. I don't know if you also have found that, Afarin, but asking them like if something makes sense or not, or like if something is still unclear, and kind of struggling with it with the students in class also helps kind of hone your skills as a teacher.
Yeah. I usually ask towards the end of the semester or term, I would ask them, what was helpful to you? What would you change for the next cohort? And honestly, some of them, like, it's like we don't want to have all these different assignments, right? So I hear that, but I may not necessarily change that. Some of them are really helpful, and yeah, I try to learn from them.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. All right. Ryan, were you able to access your questions, or would you like me to share the next one?
No, yes, ma'am. I found them. I appreciate you
Okay,
asking though.
good.
So Farine, I was wondering, if applicable, of course, how do or have you navigated or navigate currently gatekeeping
Hmm.
with training therapists?
Yeah. It's also a great question. So I think for me, it's balancing compassion with responsibility. And I actually had a student, for this specific student, through, practicum and supervision, it seemed that it was really hard for them to listen to clients, to have to provide empathy. And sometimes they had like dismissive behaviors towards the clients. So what I did, like I tried to have a conversation with this client, with this student. We try to kind of like, I try to address it directly. I try to have, different kind of like exercises, videos, conversations, extra supervision, all those different things. And then after, a few other sessions, it seemed like it was the same thing. So again, like I tried to address the whole concern directly with the student and talk about the expectations clearly, and address the boundaries, all those different things. But at the end, we had to make a difficult decision. And I recommend like considering other fields to pursue. And it was a very difficult conversation and decision, but I think that we should try to remember that the well-being of our clients is in the forefront, right? And we need to be mindful of that, and we need to kind of like be fair and at the same time think about professional development. A lot of times when it comes to mental health, some people are more flexible about it. But if you imagine, like if it was the same situation with like physical health, like it was about training physicians, doctors, like there are just more rigid kind of like boundaries, expectations, lines. And I hope that, again, like it's difficult, but I hope that we can have the same conversation in the mental health field.
I
Sophia.
love this. Yeah, I was just thinking about everything you're sharing, Afarin. Yeah. Um, I have run into the situation that you're describing as well, where we had to cancel someone out of the program. Um, I think remediation is something that we don't teach in graduate school or like our PhD programs. And then you become a supervisor and you're like, wow, what is remediation? And how do I do this with my supervisees? And then how do I do it with my students? So remediation is really important I mean, developmentally, just to give students a chance to work through or like progress their skills or their dispositions in a way that you find that is ethically appropriate for practice. I think pulling other professors in or consulting with your immediate supervisor, whether that's a program director or department chair, is very important as well, just to make them aware. Maybe they can share a similar experience, or just be there when you meet with the student. Even just initiating a meeting about that can be so nerve-wracking. Like the student gets really nervous. And so I have tried to phrase this in the past in a way that shows that I want to have this meeting with you to help you succeed in the program. Like it's really important for me that you understand that I want to be a resource and not a barrier for you in your career. So just really framing it in with that mindset, because just the power differential of like professor and student can create so much agony and angst and anxiety when you tell the student, oh, we have to have a meeting, we have to talk, right? It's like terrifying. So yeah, remediation is really important. Remediation in writing is really important. So like what you observed, things that the student can do, like tangible activities that you want the student to complete, and a deadline for those activities, and then follow up to that. So by the time, you know, you're expecting them to complete certain activities, to follow up with them. Now, when the student does not respond to remediation in that regard, then yeah, that becomes again a larger conversation that you need to have as a program. And yeah, the gatekeeping process is not for the faint of heart, for sure. Both in graduate programs and in our work as supervisors. And oftentimes, you know, supervisees end up switching to another supervisor if you give them hard time. And so I think there's a lot more that can be done from a board rule perspective to account for that type of behavior, where someone just stops working with you and starts working with another supervisor just to continue getting their hours to get licensed.
No, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
you guys both, these are such insightful answers, because although the remediation I have received has been very minimal and much more academically focused, just to kind of get some like assignments and stuff like that, where it needs to be particularly like psychopathology and psychopharmacology were just like insane classes. And I learned it, and it was great, but it was not for the faint of heart, as you mentioned. But we wear so many hats too, because training therapists is more than just getting grades, right? So it's like, how do you have that conversation with somebody? Like, yeah, the way you were being is not aligning with our code of ethics as a therapist. That's like, with this power differential, I know of colleagues, well, previous colleagues of mine who have been through that remediation. It felt as if they were being told to change as a person. And like some of the hard realities that it's like, yeah, you kind of need to, at least professionally, in your identity, right? Who you are as a person's fine, right? It goes back to intersectionality, but like who you are as a professional, like we have codes of conduct, right, for that. And we have ways of being that need to line up with what we're doing. And it's just an incredibly fickle conversation to have, and I couldn't agree more. I think there's more that could be done, and particularly graduate education, but even in terms of like regulation through BHAC and stuff, of like, how do we keep this from perpetuating, so that, oh, I don't like what you have to say, I'll just go to the program. Oh, I don't like what you have to say, let me just go to the supervisor. It's like, well, that doesn't, he said, kind of a bigger conversation about, well, what services is doing for like the citizens of like our state, the clients that we're seeing. That's just a hard conversation to have, and I appreciate y'all's at least willingness. Like you said, it's not for the faint of heart, but if you go down this path of teaching and training therapists, that's like an integral responsibility we have to maintain without fault. It's an area of growth for me, so I'm glad I've asked this question. I'm glad I'm not the only one that kind of gets scared about thinking about it. Of like,
Yeah.
hey, yeah, you should not be in this program anymore. That conversation, Afarin, is that scares me to my core to have that with somebody. But nonetheless, like you said, if that's what needs to be done, we have to be able to step up and do that. So
Yeah.
Well, I've
Just
got one more. What's up?
for context, I wanted to clarify for our listeners that BHEC is the Behavioral Health Executive Council, which governs the MFT board and the licensed professional counselor board, the social workers and the psychologist board here in Texas. So one of the new rules that we're suggesting, me and some other colleagues, is on our online licensing system, supervisors should be also listed under an associate's record. Right now, we only have associates listed under the supervisor's record, but in that way, we can also see the history of an associate changing supervisors and being able to track like what was the progress that was done with the previous supervisor, etc. I think that's important from a remediation perspective when people tend to rapidly switch supervisors if remediation issues occur. Yeah. Awesome. Ryan, take us to your final question. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that that clarification, right, for all of
Sure.
our listeners to know what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That's a great rule proposition, by the way. So my fifth and final question I have for you guys is something that I actually did because we we had a similar assignment when we were a graduate student. We had to ask an alumni who graduated from our program, like we had to do an interview with them. So this is the first question I actually made, but I wanted to save it for last. And it's what do you wish you would have known before entering your career in training therapists?
It depends on how much time do we have. Yeah, but I think that's a great question. A few things come to mind. I think one of them is like I wish I knew how personal it is, like this whole journey, how personal it can be. And also the thing that I already mentioned about like finding my voice. I guess like early, like when I was in my 20s or something, I thought that I'm going to study all these different things, and as if like they're going to inject a USB drive in my head. I learn about all these different things, and I do like I do therapy, right, or teach. And we all know it's not like that, right? So I wish I knew those things, and also like the emotional labor that it could have on you, working with the students, and also like being a therapist. They are rewarding and a great privilege to have, and at the same time, sometimes it's taxing, right? Especially again, like considering that systemic perspective and thinking about all the different social injustice issues and all the different kind of like policies that we have in academia, all the different things that we need to follow, but sometimes they don't make sense. So the whole experience, again, like it could be very rewarding, and at the same time, it can have emotional labor on you in terms of navigating different things, issues, and concerns that would come up. So yeah, I can talk about that more, but I pause and I would, wait for Sophia to see what she thinks.
Yeah, I would love to hear more though, Afarin. I don't know if you want to expand more, I would love to hear your perspective on like yeah, just more thoughts on what are some of the hardest things that you didn't expect they would show up and then they did, that kind of a thing.
For I mentioned different things, but for the personal journey, like you learn about all these different things, and when you want to teach them, you're also a human being. So let's say if you have a trauma course to teach, like talking about a lot of different things, and a lot of different things may come up for you, or you may have a student who is reacting to all the different things that you're talking about. So now you need to teach a class. If it's about you, you need to do emotional regulation, be mindful of your own biases, your own stories. Hopefully you go to therapy. And if it's about a student, you kind of need to balance the class and support the student, in many different ways. So that's one part of what I mean by personal, right? When I said like finding your voice, as I mentioned before, like if I knew this earlier in my career, especially like me, someone who came from Iran to the US with the whole power dynamic, in the beginning, I thought that this is, you know, this is the right thing, right? This is the US, this is like West, like they know what they're doing. So I just need to say yes to everything that I learned. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yes, that is true, right? I do not challenge anything. And that doesn't mean like this is like, so, and it took me some years to understand, you know, you can challenge everything. You can question everything. There's, you know, power dynamic. There's like privilege, there's bias, or all these different things. So again, like finding my voice, asking questions, telling the truth for me, not the big truth. So all those different things, I wish I knew them sooner. And then the last thing that I was talking about was the emotional labor. And I think again, like that comes either as a therapist or, you know, as a teacher, professor. Both of them, they are rewarding experience, and at the same time, it could be sometimes exhausting because you are working with many different stories, even in teaching, right? And you are, again, like working in different systems. When we're talking about teaching, we're talking about academia and all the different like mindset and policies and things that you may not agree with, or it may not make sense to you, but at the same time, you cannot change the system, you know, overnight. So I try to practice to be tough with systems in general, and easy and gentle with people. And that is sometimes easy when you say it, it's not easy in practice. And again, like it has emotional labor for you.
Yeah, so true. I find that what something I didn't know before I started teaching full time, Ryan, is that I much more energy may get sucked out of me just dealing with academic administration and higher education leadership than with the students themselves. Like the students are like the rewarding part of my day. And we are based here at Clear Lake, it's a cohort system. So the students get to know each other really well, and I get to know them as a cohort and individually also really well. So it's most of the time it's very rewarding to work with students, but then you get into the nitty gritty of like budgets and bills that are affecting state universities in your state, and you know, all of the different things that affect our day to day as professors that I had no idea, right? In addition, even before I came to the academy full time, I was following this Facebook group called The Professor Is Out. It's run by Dr. Karen Kielski, who used to, and I think she still does have a practice called The Professor Is In, helping people get into the academy. This particular group, The Professor Is Out, when I started following it on Facebook, I started reading people's experiences in academia, and it sounded like a lot of the environments people were in sounded very abusive and toxic. So some of the things I learned as I'm working on training therapists now full time have to do with like protecting my rights as an employee, protecting my privacy, protecting my time, saying no to perhaps, you know, extra service that is just not something that I'm necessarily going to be rewarded for. It's more like busy work that perhaps my superiors want me to take care of. So saying no to things, setting boundaries around this is part of my scholarship, this is part of my service, this is part of my teaching, right? And tracking my time. These things I would never think to do like before I was in academia full time, and I just learned to do them to protect myself and being able to cite reasons for not being able to do everything that I'm asked to do, basically. Yeah. So having a really clear mission on like, this is part of my scholarship agenda, or this is part of my service that I want to take care of this year, right? And like making sure that you're letting people know my plate is as full as I would like it to be right now. And thank you so much for the opportunity, but you know, I'm not going to take it this time. So yeah, these are again finding our voice, right? Like Afarin said, I think that's something that you kind of discover when you get into a full-time position. But yeah, I do want people to go into the academia like hungry to teach, but also with their eyes open about the potential dangers, especially for people with marginalized identities, historically oppressed identities. Yeah. That's such a great question to round up the conversation too.
Yeah, well, and you guys gave some, I mean, absolutely fabulous answers. I know that was something that I was not anticipating to hear, but that is something that is incredibly wealthy in terms of knowledge. And so I really appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts and just authentic experiences of what it's like. I'm excited to join. I like what you said, Sophia, about being hungry to teach, but also not being exploited. And as someone who is obviously like a straight white male, I know that I don't have nearly the type of experience that other my colleagues have had, but nonetheless, I feel like that's something we can champion with our other colleagues and moving up. And so I am definitely something to be aware of, and I really appreciate those thoughts on that.
The challenge for the privileged part of ourselves is how do we use that in a way that serves as allyship, right? Like how do you stand up? How do you create awareness? What do you say in, program meetings or department meetings? What do you say in even in email responses about different policies and other situations, right? I think you can make a big difference, even though you're not the one like historically marginalized, perhaps through some of your identities. You can still make a huge difference in how you show up for your colleagues and your students, of course. Yeah. All right. So there you have it, folks. I want to say a big thank you to our fantastic guests today for sharing their experiences. Dr. Afarin Rajaei. I hope Dr. Rajaei's wisdom and experiences will help you, Ryan, and all our fellow educators and listeners on their own academic career journey. I hope you found today's discussion both enlightening and inspiring. If you're hungry for more engaging conversations and lessons learned, be sure to follow our Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy podcast episodes on Spotify and wherever podcasts are available. We will have exciting podcast episodes coming up every month, so stay tuned. And remember that at STMFT, we believe in the power of mentorship and the importance of representation in education. If you're interested in becoming a part of our mission, or you're seeking guidance for your educational journey in teaching systemic therapy, please visit our website, www.stmft.coastmft.org, and consider joining our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/group/STMFT. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, keep connecting and learning with your colleagues. This is Dr. Sofia Georgiadou signing off for STMFT's Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy.